Welcome back to another one of my videos. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Lotta, and today I'm going to show you how to make this really delicious berry chocolate cake. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Now the first thing we need to make is our chocolate cake so we can get that cooled off. So for the cake, you're going to need 125 grams of softened butter, 125 grams of sugar with a pinch of salt, 50 grams of melted chocolate, 2 eggs, 175 grams of flour, 25 grams of cocoa powder, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and last but not least, 125 milliliters of milk. Now for this chocolate cake, I decided to use both cocoa powder and melted chocolate just to get a little bit more of a rich chocolate flavor. But again, you can feel free to just use melted chocolate or just cocoa powder as well. Now we're going to start by letting our butter, sugar, salt, and our melted chocolate whip up until it's nice and fluffy before adding in our eggs one at a time. And I just like to scrape down the sides just to make sure that everything is getting incorporated. Now that we've got a nice chocolatey, buttery, sugary mixture, we can go ahead and add our remaining ingredients. Now because I'm using whole wheat flour, I'm not going to sieve in my dry ingredients, but if you're using normal flour, feel free to give your dry ingredients a quick sieve just to make sure that there's no clumps of cocoa powder, and it's also just going to add a little bit more airiness to your cake as well. And you just want to mix until everything's nice and combined like this. And once again, you can feel free to add just about anything else to this basic recipe and customize it however you want. You can add some ground nuts or some more chocolate pieces, or just leave it like this. Now I already went ahead and prepped my cake tin with just a little bit of oil and flour, so hopefully the cake won't stick to it and it'll come out in one piece. Now I am using a cake tin that has like this little round cut out in a way, and that's basically where we're going to add our filling. If you don't have a cake tin like this, you can always just use a normal cake tin as well, and then you just kind of have to keep a cake ring around it while our filling's set, because else they're just going to squeeze out everywhere. And if you don't want to make this cake, you can also substitute it for like a chocolate tart shell, and then just use our fillings like you would with this cake and just put it in a tart shell instead. Now our cake can wander into the oven that's been preheated to 180 degrees Celsius or 360 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's going to bake for about 25 minutes. Now for the berry filling, you're going to need 150 grams of mixed berries. I used 50 grams each of blueberries, raspberries, and strawberries. You're also going to need the juice of half a lemon, 10 grams of sugar, 10 grams of cornstarch. I'm adding some vanilla for flavor, and last but not least, 15 grams of butter. Now I always like using frozen berries, so I just let them thaw on my counter, or I just microwave them for a little bit, just so that we can puree them right away. And once we've pureed them, I'm going to sieve them to get out any of the seeds from my raspberries, but again, feel free to skip that part as well. Now that we've strained out any seeds or chunks from our berries, we can go ahead and add our remaining ingredients except for our butter. And I usually also like to dissolve my cornstarch with a little bit of water before I add it to my berry mixture as well. Dissolving your cornstarch, just make sure that it's not going to be all chunky later on. There we go. At this point, we're going to bring our berry mixture up to a boil, and as it boils, it's going to get nice and thick, almost like a pudding-like consistency, which is exactly what you want. Now, as it boils and as it thickens up, it's also going to become a little bit more clear and a little bit less cloudy from the cornstarch, which is a good sign that you're on the right track. So now at this point, we're just going to really quickly mix in our butter as well. There we go. Now, I always like covering this with a little bit of plastic wrap just to make sure that there's no film or skin that dries up on the top. And we're just going to set this aside to cool off for now. Now, while our cake and our filling is cooling off, we can go ahead and make our chocolate ganache. So I'm using a 1-to-1 ratio, which is 100 grams of dark chocolate that I've already chopped up and 100 milliliters of heavy cream. Now, ganache goes really quickly. We're basically just gonna go ahead and quickly boil our cream, pour it over our chocolate, let that sit for about 5 minutes, and then whisk it together until it's nice and smooth and velvety. Now, thankfully, my cake came out in one piece, and as you can see, there is that little divot here in the inside, which is going to hold our fillings. So I'm going to start by adding my berry filling and smoothing that out nice and straight. I am going to set aside about a tablespoon or two because I might want to use it to do some decorating on top. Now, my berry filling isn't completely cooled off yet, so it's still a little bit more liquid than what it's going to be like when it's completely cooled off and it's been chilled. That being said, layering can get a little bit more messy at this point. So I'm just going to be very gentle with it, and I'm going to spoon on my ganache to kind of start spreading it out already, just so that I'm applying the least amount of pressure as possible because I do want some nice even layers. You could always just wait for your filling to completely cool off before you make your ganache and then layer your cake. our cake can wander into the fridge for about an hour just to let everything set and chill, and then we can go ahead and do some decorating. So it's been about an hour and the ganache is definitely set, which is perfect. Now at this point we can already start and do a little bit of decorating. Now again, feel free to leave it just like this or do some decorating, which is what I'm going to do. I already went ahead and whipped up about 250 milliliters of heavy cream with just some sugar and vanilla to taste. And I also transferred it into a piping bag with a piping tip that is a little bit thicker at the bottom and a little bit thinner at the top. And that's going to give us like a really nice, almost swirly look. So I'm basically just going to cover my entire cake with little switchbacks and swirls. But again, you can do whatever you want to do. Now for the final touches, I'm going to be using some fresh blueberries and strawberries, as well as some of my leftover berry filling. And there's our chocolate berry cake. So that's going to be everything for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up or write me a comment down below. And as always, the entire recipe is going to be in the description box as well. And I'll see you next week with another cake recipe.